Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Take the Win. Today, we're speaking to the head of education, Mr. Jason Clarke at Equiti Group.
How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you, Jason?
Yeah, very well. Slightly trepidatious, a little nervous. I've always wanted to sort of be on a podcast. I've been listening to them for years. So
Is this your first podcast?
first podcast ever, yeah. So yeah, it's good. I'm excited.
What type of podcast do you tend to listen to?
History, culture. I think the first podcast I ever listened to was Melvin Bragg in Our Time.
Okay.
Yeah, and
What was that about?
Big ideas of our time that have kind of formed our sense of what a civilization is. So
Okay,
pretty
so
broad, yeah.
A broad interest in civilization, where we were and where we are and where we're going.
Very much so, yeah.
Okay.
And then all sorts, finance ones, economists, Planet Money, these kinds of things, all sorts of podcasts. But yeah, I just enjoy the format. So I'm just super stoked actually to be kind of in it.
Excellent. It was my first time hosting.
Okay.
So a lot of firsts.
Yeah.
And talking of a lot of firsts, you had a big transition in your life over the last 2-3 years. So is it 2-3 years you've been at Equiti now?
Yeah, so in July it will be 3 years. I remember I came on as a consultant months before actually officially starting, so it's kind of now it's 3 years actually.
And before that, you were in the education sector. You were in you were a teacher, and then you kind of became a head of secondary, or so that's been your background, hasn't it? In academia predominantly.
Yeah, for sure. And prior to that, I worked for like a media agency and an advertising agency. And then I worked for a holiday company. So I've kind of been in front of a camera before because we kind of did shoots for essentially infomercials, this kind of thing. And then after advertising, I went into teaching then. So I was like an economics teacher. And then I became like a head of department for economics, then a head of faculty for economics, work-related learning and commerce, business studies and stuff, accountancy. And then I kind of went into, school leadership, we'd call it in the UK, maybe school administration in different places. And so I was like a head of sixth form and then a deputy head. I never actually got to a headship position. It's quite a demanding thing. But that's the core of my professional background, but certainly the one in education, yeah.
What a change. The education sector with students, kind of rigid in terms of timelines, but long school holidays, long summer holidays, long Christmas holidays. Everyone talks about teachers and all of their holidays.
Yeah.
You know? And then you joined Equiti.
Yeah.
And that was a complete change, I imagine.
Yeah, it really was. Don't remind me of those holidays, because I do miss those dearly, actually. But but you know what? The longer that I've been in this job, it's really sort of interesting to me how much of it is similar. Because I think that once you're in an institution, once you're in, any collection of people, there are certain common themes that present themselves over and over again.
No matter what age?
Yeah.
Because you've got colleagues who are teachers who are your age, your peers, let's say.
Yeah.
And then you've got the students who are a lot younger, but the dynamics of their characters and personalities are the same.
Yeah. We're apes. We're psychosocial animals. We like to, play with each other's feelings. We like to please each other and all the rest of it. I think that happens. It happens obviously very differently in terms of the hierarchy of a teacher and a student. But, there are similar things going on. What you've got to remember as well is that a lot of your sort of mental energy is spent, particularly when you're in school leadership, actually dealing with other adults, right? And all adults are the same. I think that schools can be infantilizing, though. Mm-hmm. You're around children all the time. There's a classic kind of teacher personality. You'll see it sometimes. You'll go into a scenario and you kind of start to be a bit teacherly. I find myself doing that. I don't think that people at Equiti that jives with them well. But I think there's a lot more similarities than certainly what I first thought, because when I first came in, it really seemed like an alien. It was a very different culture to me.
That transition, that change, did it? Was it dramatic? Because you said it it hit you hard to begin with? Is it because of the scenario? You're in brokerage, you're in finance, you're in a fintech. Everyone is very much focusing on targets, focusing on bottom line. Little room for kind of leeway, let's say.
Yeah.
Well, was that strange?
Yeah, it was. There's two aspects to that. Teaching is very difficult. It's a demanding profession. A lot of teachers experience burnout because you're dealing with things which are very human problems. Yeah, and whether that's through dealing with the students who are really trying to, do their best, they're growing, they're maturing. It's a difficult time for them sometimes, but then also their parents as well. Their parents are obviously heavily invested in what their kids do, and they want to make sure that the teachers, the school, the institution that they're in is kind of supporting that. So for that reason, it's like when you're trying to think about a big project. So as you go into school leadership, it's less about, daily interactions and teaching. You're trying to provide a different strand to the curriculum, or you're trying to provide a different way of going into it.
I mean, with the level of regulation around academia, I feel, because my kids now, I've got three boys, one 12, one 9, and one 5. Mm-hmm. There's very little room for kind of thinking outside of the box, or for the schools to kind of push boundaries, because you've got your local education regulators that give you a certain mandate of things that you can teach.
Yeah.
I imagine coming into here, it's pretty broad. You can do what you want. You can teach what you want. You can kind of use whatever tools that the company allows the resources to, or facilitates resources to you. I feel like, because Absolutely. For me, I feel there's the opportunity for development, for evolution within education is significant. And I feel like people are seeking it independently because schools are not able to adapt to them as fast enough.
I couldn't have put it better, actually. It's so broad. And it is very constricting in schools because, all leads back to what has been distilled as the curriculum in a school. And then when you're in the English education system, that's how it is interpreted through 4 or 5 different examining bodies. And then as a school, you select who those examining bodies and certifications where they might come from. And then you're essentially, we used to call it a long time ago, constructive alignment. You are teaching to the test, essentially. Well, when you come here as, both internally and externally, it's like you're kind of, all right, well, what do we want to teach? There's quite a few sort of modern schools now, like Avenue School in New York. They kind of design their curriculum from the ground up. What is it that we want these kids to be able to do when they pass out? Before they go to university, what's the best way that we can prepare them? So it's really open.
Pass out of university, not pass out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really freeing. And that's what it was here as well. The other part of that is, and I'm sure that many people say this about their companies, but the values in this company, the way that people are, I was just speaking to somebody literally an hour ago. They started here 2 weeks ago. I started here 3 years ago. We've changed a lot as a company, but in the intervening 3 years, he said exactly the same thing that I said. It's unbelievable how supportive people are. It's unbelievable how receptive to new ideas people are. And I think that was the big thing for me. It didn't feel like, I'm in a fintech, I've got to learn about MAMs or something, right? It just felt like I was around a lot of people who felt fully energized. They had a common goal. And they were willing to support anybody who was fully entrusted to do that, and they felt had the ability to do it. And honestly, that's what it's always been at this company. And I love coming here to Dubai in particular because I feel like there's a lot of people here who are like that. But it's the same in every office that you go to. So, yeah, for me, it was a culture shift. There were a lot of technical aspects of, as an economics teacher, I'll teach about, the dry aspects of the subject, and this is what a market is, and supply and demand curves, and disjuncts, and all this kind of thing. But actually, when you get in here, it's like there's a whole set of technology you don't understand. There are customer and client interactions you don't understand. You don't understand about pricing aggregation. You don't understand about. There's so many things. As a teacher, you're never going to need to teach, certain, but also you're maybe not exposed to as well because they're a part of the infrastructure of how this industry works. So that was quite daunting for me, but also it's been really enlivening for me as an educator and just as a person who wants to learn and grow.
And you're responsible for two aspects of education within the organization: internal education and external education. The external predominantly focus on financial literacy, on kind of different levels of financial literacy, from managing your own finances all the way through to technical and fundamental analysis and how to read charts and trade on charts, correct? And
I think
entirely different frameworks. You look at those problems in different aspects.
Totally, yeah. The part of it that I'm involved in is a smaller part. So I think that a lot of our education goes out through our seminars or in-person events and so on. And I think I've had less of a handle on that. But I think that particularly when it comes to our East African education, primarily Kenya, but also Uganda and so on, is that we've got a team of educators there. And I've had a good steer on that. And I've been able to work with those people in thinking about how it is that we kind of, what our educational messaging is. But honestly, our marketing team just do such a fantastic job of scheduling those events, making sure that the copy's right to engage those types of teams. I think I've had less involvement in that, but that's just because we've got so much expertise that already exists there. But yeah, I think in the early years, the first 2 years, it was really about rejigging that curriculum in Kenya and making sure that it kind of met the needs of our customers, more instructional content, more stuff about sort of active engagement in the platforms and how to gamify some of those things. So there's that part of it. Also as well, we have like an evergreen content, and that was like me as an old school kind of curriculum builder. It was just looking at how we kind of break up thematically what it is to learn to be a trader. I think I originally had it as start, plan, analyze, strategize. We call it something different now, but it was along those lines. It was about managing risks, just the very basic start, risk management, analysis, forms of analysis, technical analysis, fundamental analysis, and so on. And and strategize just about different ways of trading and how you have to manage your time and kind of budgeting and so on for those kinds of things. So that's principally about that, which is I've had less of an impact on. But internally, it's about upskilling our people. So partly is an engagement strategy, making sure that people feel that we care for them as a company, which we do. And, you know, that's evidence in the kind of the budget that's afforded for people to be able to get involved in the kind of education that they feel that they need. Leadership programs. So our HYPO program is our first year of this year, but we're going to be continuing.
Let's talk about HYPO a little bit. I mean, that was the first of its kind at Equiti. You led that from sourcing and dealing with that. What was the biggest learnings for you from that? Obviously, the first time basically it was a leadership program within Equiti, focused on all the high potentials. And people want to invest into, they're going to be leading the organization in the next 3 to 5 years, let's say. What was your biggest learning experience out of that?
It's a big question, actually. I think it was, there's always a part of you when you work in L&D, and I've sort of discovered this over maybe the last year or two from speaking with other L&D professionals, learning development professionals, is that you think maybe people don't care about it so much. It's like, you know, it's kind of gilding the lily. It's just a neat little trick and stuff. People do care about it. And so I think that as the year progressed, I realized that, you know, I had to be more vocal about that. And I don't think that I was. I think I kind of missed out on being more vocal about it. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, people are sick of that. They don't want to hear about it. But I think that people do care about it. And, you know, I know that from, you know, the emails and the messages.
All people are different, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And that's one thing that I discovered. Like for some people, this is an essential part of their growth. You know? And I always talk about personal growth, career growth, and financial growth at any company or any organization. And I think that kind of personal career growth is essential for them, and L&D is an essential part of it. And you don't realize the impact it has on people till that random coffee that you're having with someone, or that random lunch that you're having with someone. They're like, "Oh my God, this is a big thing."
That's it, right? Yeah, you get caught out by things like that, a message or an email, or what's happening with next year's, or this kind of thing, or even like speaking to some of the hypos were tired of the program. You know, we've had such a busy year in 2024. We've changed and matured so much as a company, and a lot of those people were inextricably involved in so many of those things. So it was difficult for them to do this at the side as well.
That's part of growth, though. Part of leadership.
Absolutely.
Multitasking.
You know, you got to cut your teeth.
You know?
But
so
I think
it's direct learnings and indirect learnings, I imagine.
I think
that's my feedback.
Yeah. No.
When I ask them to work weekends.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've run into that. We're trying to get people to be Scrum Masters, and we've said that maybe they don't want to do it on the weekend. But then you speak to them, and each one of them said, you know, what I really took from this was, actually, I need to do this. Or I really loved the executive coaching sessions because it drew this out of me. Or the presentation section, I didn't realize how kind of simple and kind of formulaic it can be, and that calms me down. It's funny, I was saying to some of them the other day, it's like I kind of feel like that feeling, one thing that I miss from teaching is you get that sense of pride. You know, I used to have a student, he went on to be like a central banker for the Canadian Central Bank, and he send you an email to say, thank you, sir, I love those economics lessons, it was amazing. It's so rewarding to hear that, it's an amazing thing. And whilst the hypos might not exactly have that exact sentiment, you can see
today.
But there's some things that came out.
I do believe in my message to them is always, you're going to appreciate your learnings, not today. You're going to appreciate them in about 3 years' time. There's going to be that certain piece of information that you'll reflect on in 3 years' time in a certain situation. That's what happened with me when I did my MBA, and I felt the impact of the MBA really hit me 2 to 3 years afterwards. And it still hits me to today. Certain nuggets of information that people have said that I always reflect on in a challenging situation or in a situation where it's foreign to me in a sense, and it's not that full suite of knowledge for a year and a half or 2 years. It's 10 pieces of information that I've carried forward with me.
Yeah, and they kind of like just rest there. It's like soil, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden something grows out of that, and you're like, oh, I kind of conceptualized that. I read about it, but here I am living and breathing it.
It was immaterial when I heard it.
Yeah.
The first time.
I
think that's going to really help with those guys a lot.
Yeah. Let's hope so.
It's exciting. And financial literacy. We had a program. You guys were so successful at it. We educated 1 million people through our seminars, through our webinars, through different mediums of communication. How was that? What an accomplishment.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You know, I've got to give a shout out to the education team now. Brenda Karima and the education partners, Robert, who's still with us, and Prudence as well. But we had others as well in the past, and they were fantastic. They really made a difference. But yeah, they were on the ground. They were running the physical sessions, but the webinars, I think the amount of engagement that we had.
Oh, what a number, 1 million people.
The podcasts as well.
Yeah,
the podcasts were amazing. The amount, the audience that we reach in the way that we do. Like a big thing of it is about being finance adjacent. You know, I think that's a trend that's come about, but I think we were kind of first to market with that, with the podcast in Kenya. And I think that really broadens the reach. You know, we might say it opens up the funnel, but I think it's just sometimes financial literacy is not about, you know, getting these didactic lessons about this is what compound interest is and this is what inflation is. It's about having skin in the game. I remember you said this to me 3 years ago. Open up an account. Have skin in the game. Then you're going to know what it is. You're going to know the cut and thrust. Then you'll learn what a stop loss is. Then you'll learn what take profit is. If you're not doing anything, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So I think that to teach that in a way which is real, it has to be contextualized, it's all in there. I think that's something that I'll forever be proud of. Very proud of the whole team that actually did the real work of making it happen. It's fantastic. And you see people's faces when they're learning. We have the Kahoot quizzes, the engagement that happens. I was honored enough to be there for the celebration of passing that 1 million number. And that was a fantastic evening. It was a great time. But yeah, you kind of see the culmination.
On the stage at one point, weren't you?
I was doing my version of a crip walk.
Nice work.
I'd give it B+, maybe solid B. But it was good. And it was just, it's great. You know, you talk about this in school. I used to talk about, in schools about different policies, supply side policies, different ways of making people more productive and so on. One of them is about, you know, full scale education. There's so many things that need to change about education in very many jurisdictions to make it so that people have that very commonsensical view of what it is to be financially literate, hopefully leading to be financially free and so on. To actually be part of that and to do that in a responsible way as well. You know, we are telling people exactly what they should and shouldn't do, and that message was always very clear and we were always there.
Highlighting the risks before the opportunity.
Always. And to be part of that, that's
and that still
something
doesn't
that
give
I'll
you
always
that
be
full
proud
protection. It's just ensuring that you're giving them those guidelines.
Absolutely.
But I think that's what's so necessary. And I started the conversation saying there's such a gap in education today.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that gap needs to be, it needs to be bridged because, like I said, people are becoming more independent in seeking information, podcasts, YouTube, ultimately different avenues of gaining information. And ultimately what we need to better understand is what we're trying to do is bridge that gap. You know? I leave I graduate from college or I graduate from school, and what about budgeting? What about financing? When did someone sit me down and tell me, well, this is your income, these are your outgoings, these are your savings, this is what interest does, this is the opportunity of investing, and this is the missed opportunity of investing. That has to be done independently in today's world.
Yeah, big time. And those things that you've just talked about there, like budgeting, we refer to it as a cycle of financial freedom. You know, so you make income. Of course, you're going to spend some of that. Some of that you have to spend. Some of that saving you should invest. And then you have to manage your risk as well from some of those things. That's something that we've started to do with universities. You know, we've done it more in Kenya. We're trying to do it here in the UAE, and just give people an understanding that, for instance, what we do, that should represent a tiny portion of what it is that they do with their money to invest, right? There should be other things that they're doing as well, particularly at that age when they're trying to build wealth or that, you know, they're starting that journey. It doesn't happen in schools. So I'd teach GCSE economics, which is like 14 to 16, and then I would teach A-level economics, 16 to 18, so this is pre-U. I can't recall a single part of it that was about savings, budgeting, what compound interest is, how they can save for the future now. You know, financial markets are predicated on this, and yet we're talking about a GCSE which is about financial markets and the allocation of resources, but we're not talking about how they allocate their resources. There are certain school programs, but they're kind of they're extracurricular. So we used to have a program at the City of London Academy which was called the brokerage program. That was about them understanding the professions that they can go into, because a lot of them were from disadvantaged backgrounds. They didn't have the professional network that a lot of kids would at maybe sort of a fee-paying school. So that was about that. Then we used to have a Barclays Challenge, and it was about them kind of, it was more about enterprise. Enterprise was like a really fashionable thing. It was about how they would run a business and so on. It's difficult. We can't teach people about how to run a business, but we can teach them about the value of money and withholding that money, deferring value and making sure that you keep hold of value and what impact inflation has and so on. We can teach them about those things, but there's got to be something that makes them understand it in a real sense. So I used to say, in UK schools, it's probably the same in other schools, you have this thing called a pupil premium. Essentially, it's the amount of money that the school gets for each student. Schools can decide on that and what's done with
resources to that student, or
not particularly on a student-by-student basis, but it's basically the pot that you have. And I think that schools should be able to make choices about that. And some of them, for instance, should be, it's a bit of a wild idea, but can a kid start a pension? You know, say to the parents, you might not get books. You can pay for the books if you want, because otherwise the school has to pay for the books. But what we can do on your child's behalf is dedicate some part of their pupil premium to a pension pot that's the same as the teacher's pension. Would you like to do that? That's your choice. Then you can have lessons around that, right? You can actually talk to the kids and say, your parents are yet to make the choice, but this is what a pension pot looks like. This is what it looks like if we spread money over a load of different assets in one fund. And this is what it might look like when you leave school at 16 or 18. And that's your decision though. Or do you want your mother and father to not have to pay for books? That sounds like a crazy idea, but some version of that allows them to, in context, understand what a pension is and what compound interest is and what it is to forego one thing now for a benefit later.
Ultimately, you need to have the skin in the game for that to matter. And you need to find a way to get people to have skin in the game to come to a realization of the importance of these dynamics in your future life.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Early on
it's
as
all up in
possible,
the
that's
air.
best.
It's
I
very
mean,
difficult.
with my kids, I'm thinking about how, obviously, I'm in the trading business, I'm in the brokerage business, I'm in the investment business. It's a much easier vehicle for them to kind of tap into and learn about that. But others who are, even if their parents are doctors or if their parents are engineers, who have less access to financial investing, education, then how do you bridge that gap? And I think kids are getting a lot smarter. They're having a lot more access to information than we did.
Yeah.
You know, there are TikToks, there are Snapchats, there are Instagrams, there are different mediums of communication. I mean, my kids are talking about money far way ahead than I ever talked about money. And I think these influencers are all about followers and earnings, and it's a strange.
Do you think they get that because that's kind of the way of the world, or do you think they get that from you as a parent who's obviously very much involved in finance? And
No, it's nothing to do with me. I do question is, do they get that because they're living in Dubai, but they're following like the Mr. Beasts and these kind of big influencers, which are global.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
like my 5-year-old son comes to me and says he's doing an exercise where if you compete, then you get $5 million. And my kid's 5. What does he know the difference between $5 million or $5? Or what should he? Obviously. But obviously, they're starting to talk about the impact of money in your life from such an early stage. Is it healthy? Is it not? That's another question.
Yeah.
Civilization podcasts, potentially.
Yeah, in our time.
Yeah.
My kids talk about money, but I think that's because we talk about money a lot. Some of that has been by design, because we kind of want them to sort of understand that there are certain, exactly. There are certain things that we can't do. We can't do that. It's too expensive. And I think we had a long time in a different country where things weren't too expensive. So we could do whatever we wanted all the time. And I think for our eldest, she's maybe a bit more like that, but she understands now and she's maturing. Okay, yeah, that's too expensive. We can't really do that. We've got to save for another time. I love that. I love that. I want them all to feel that. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. So, what's next with financial education at Equiti? What's coming? What's next?
Okay, well, I don't know if I'm exactly the man to ask, but I think...
Well, as head of education, I hope that you are the right man to ask.
We should get the marketing experts in, but look, I think the seminars, I think that for me personally, I'd like to see the seminars structured differently. I think that we can speak to a bigger audience.
In what sense?
Things like this. And I think for us to talk about it and for us to demystify, this is a very fashionable word, isn't it? To demystify the world of trade. Actually, no, let's make it so that there is no assumed knowledge. And let's make it so that you are, you might be interested in taking out an ISA, or some sort of long-term sort of fixed income asset or whatever. Actually, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this as part of your asset allocation? Let us tell you how you can do this sustainably, and let's see how we can be the first person to show you that. It's very tricky. I think that I would like us to be able to go out to different audiences. I don't understand marketing enough to know how we do that and whether that's cost effective and how much it costs for us to get that kind of audience. But for me, I think one of the first things that we had a kind of it was like an open discussion when I'd become a consultant with Equiti, and it was about crypto. We were trying to get like thoughts and feelings about what crypto is and what it means and who we should be talking to. I think at that time, crypto was like a very hardened thing, crypto bros and this kind of thing. It was very, you had to be in the know. And I was like, I bet there's absolutely loads of people that are interested in, making money in a way which is, hedged. They're happy to sit on it and see that, it might crash from every now and again, but then it rises. I bet there's like billions of people like that. I think we could completely open it up. So I'd like to see, for instance, in Kenya, we have more events where maybe there are more, complete beginners or people who are not too sure, but, I'll come along and check it out. I'd like us to do that. But when they come along, there's some other event going on. it's a podcast or it's a roller disco. I'm using that as an example because that's the celebration that we had. But it's like, there's a completely cool event going on and it's about female empowerment or skateboarding or whatever. But we're there talking about it because skateboarders want to have money, right?
Yeah.
Skateboarders want to, improve their life and improve their material circumstances.
So democratize it.
Yeah,
across
that's the word.
All genres of people, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have an interest in finance, but ultimately, I need money to live. You have interest in skateboarding. You have an interest in music. You have an interest in science. Ultimately, you have to have money to survive, and introducing different mediums to make money,
absolutely,
to save money.
And look, the World Bank, they're saying, well, we're here now. 5 years ago, they said that by the year 2025, more than 60% of the population, the working adult population, are going to have to reskill in some way in order to remain relevant in the labour market. I think we tend to think about that as the things that they do really in work, right? Yeah. And certainly we do see that. There are things that people have to do now that they didn't have to do before. But actually, that's also like incidental skills, life skills, understanding how to work in an increasingly gig economy where you might have a job and there's something else that you have to do, right? It might be that you have limited hours in that job, but you've got some other things as well. I'm not saying that I necessarily like a gig economy. I'm not saying that I necessarily like that people may have to take on different jobs and roles, but they might have to as well. And if that is the case, well, understanding financial markets in a way which gives you an advantage over other people, this is a skill.
It's a skill, and it's a necessary skill.
I think so.
And I think with inflation as it is, with world markets being as volatile as they are, I think it's essential for you to protect yourself. It's an essential for you to kind of let your money make you money,
Yeah.
And I think that works from $100 all the way to millions of dollars. I mean, what vehicles do you have that can allow your money to make you money? And you need to learn it as early as possible, because as you've seen in compound interest, have you seen so many examples on memes and on YouTube shorts and whatnot? You're investing at the age of 18 has a significant impact on you by the time you're 30.
Absolutely.
So education. I'm a believer of gamification of education. I think there's still a big gap in that. Make it entertaining, make it... I've looked at different YouTube clips and different websites where education can be gamified for someone who's 12, 13, 14 years old. You'll be surprised how little content there is out there on that. And that really surprised me, that I'm really struggling to find something trading for kids. And that's something that I'd recommend for us to kind of push forward on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to get in on the ground floor. So we've worked with some schools here. And, maybe they're not also appreciative of talking about that kind of of the financial markets.
And trading and investing. Obviously today at Equiti, predominantly the majority of our clients are traders. Yeah. But we are opening up new business lines for investments as well.
Exactly.
Gold investments. We're going to be introducing cash equities. We're going to be introducing fixed income very soon. All of these different elements. What does your investment wallet look like?
Yeah.
How to proportion out that investment wallet.
This is the key. When you're 15, 16, all kids should understand what a financial instrument is, what different financial assets are, and how it is that they make a return on those, and what leads to their appreciation and depreciation. And every kid should understand that.
And what's helping is the crypto wave.
Yeah.
People are understanding that I can invest in something and make 3x, 4x, 5x. Ultimately, the crypto wave is far too volatile. It doesn't give a true indicator. But the whole idea of investment, at Equiti, we've seen a huge wave back in, I think it was 2018, 2019, when Bitcoin started to make its early jumps prior to COVID 2020. And that's where we start to see a huge wave of new clients coming in who'd never been traders before. So that's that first vehicle or first avenue. And then that appetite has been whetted, let's say, and then support them with I wouldn't say real, obviously, but support them with giving them an education or enlightening them on the more traditional ones, the more volatile ones and the more new age ones, and then they can have a composition of ideas that they can formulate and build.
Big time. I think, look, for me, I'd like them to understand the stock market. I'd like them to understand equities. I'm just talking about kids here leaving schools. I'd like them to know about different sectors of those markets. I'd like them to know what the general behavior and risk profile is of different types of equities. I think once you have that and you understand those things, you can kind of go up and down in terms of risk profile. And for them to understand that, 8-9% return a year is fantastic. I think when we go into an area where they might think, I can 10x, I can 20x. It's like kind of gives them unhealthy assumptions about the way in which financial markets work. I think let them understand stocks, because what that does, it allows them to understand businesses. It allows them to understand an economic cycle. It allows them to understand like a business's balance sheet, right? And the money that they're making and when they are announcing those things. Once they get an idea of that, they really have got a good solid bedding in what financial markets are. And then they can go to ETFs. Well, ETFs are composed of those things that you talked about before, and then commodities, et cetera, et cetera. Start from that core, and then they can look at the more sort of exciting edges of the market.
Excellent. So I guess we've touched on your background, we've touched on the evolution or the gap in education today, the evolution and how we're trying to bridge that gap, different tools and mediums that people are acquiring education from today versus where it was 10 years ago, and the different mediums. So, and then, what's to come from Equiti? We've touched on that. I mean, it's a pretty broad view. Is there anything that you want to touch on before we finish today?
Yeah, I know we talked about schools, but I would just like there to be more, full service understanding and a part of every curriculum worldwide which is carved out for that. We have stats about financial literacy, and there's been different reports commissioned by different organizations. But I'd like to see that as a very significant part of PISA understanding. A kid could be a fantastic mathematician. They could be a very skillful communicator, and somebody could give them a big hunk of cash when they're 18 and they would fail. They could fail in life. If we did that the other way around and we gave them really good financial literacy from when they are 7, 8 years old, and I don't mean little bits and little initiatives and a bank comes in to speak to the school. I mean that throughout the course of the year that we're constantly talking about that. We kind of make that real in schools. We give them a budget, and this is how they spend their money. And when they run out of that money, they're not able to get a new pencil or pen or whatever it might be. Just thinking like off the cuff. I'd like to see that more. That's important to me, and it's been important to me from when I became a teacher. It was what I did my dissertation on for my PGCE. It's what I did in schools. I tried to bring as many of those opportunities as I could. I tried to do it in different countries where it's a bit more restrictive to open up those educational opportunities. And now I'm doing it now in a completely different sense, but also as well, I've got kids. I've got 3 daughters and 1 son. And, I'm trying to give a lived experience which shows we're going to have to sort of, batten down the hatches a bit. Things are tight. We have to watch our money. And then when we do, guess what we get to do? Yeah, I just think that kids should have that from a very young age, and it should be something that we don't consider the exception. It's par for the course. Everybody gets that. If people get that, not everybody's going to earn $200,000 a year or $1 million a year. But you can earn a lot less than that, and if you manage it well, you can have a good, comfortable life free of stress.
The beginnings of Equiti School. Why not?
Wow. I love it. This is why you get paid the big bucks.
You like that?
Outside the box.
Why not? Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your feedback and for your ideas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed our session on financial literacy, financial education. Where is education going on Take the Win? See you next week.